But then there's this altruistic aspect of spiritual practice, and that's where the Bodhisattva ideal comes in. My name is Amarapuspa, and we're going to continue exploring the theme, which is based on a book by our teacher Sangha called The Three Jewels of Buddhism. And just to recap a little, the three jewels are, I guess, the unifying principle in all schools of Buddhism from the time of the Buddha and throughout the ages across different countries and traditions. And the three jewels, we've explored two jewels already. We've explored the gold jewel of the Buddha. And I think this figure of the Buddha really captures that gold jewel-like quality of the Buddha jewel. And then, so Buddhism starts with the Buddha, and then there's the blue jewel of which can mean, of the Dharma, which can mean many things, but in this context, the truth, the Dharma, the truth, or reality, but also the Buddha's teaching. So first the Buddha, then his teaching. And we started last week, or the last recording, looking at the third jewel, the red precious jewel of the Sangha. And so Sangha is often translated as community, so a community of the Buddha's followers. But like the other jewels, it has many facets. And last time, we started looking at the facet of what's known as the noble Sangha, or the Sangha as in terms of a great assembly of very evolved followers of the Buddha. So that was what Sangha originally meant. So in the Buddha's lifetime, many followers gained insight, or became enlightened based on the Buddha's teachings. And then throughout time, both men and women teachers have inspired Buddhists all around in different traditions. And I guess you could say this is a type of lineage of Sangha, a lineage of people that inspires us. And yeah, so that's the Arya Sangha, the noble Sangha. And there's another aspect of Sangha, and this week, so we're in the part of the book, and it's called The Glorious Assembly of the Bodhisattvas. And yeah, so it sounds quite grand. So first we've had these amazing teachers that have inspired us through the ages. And then there's another, I guess, lineage of inspiration of what's known as a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is described, I guess, can be translated as an enlightenment being. And I guess a bodhisattva kind of evolved out of two, I guess, kind of to distinguish itself from what sometimes is seen as two trends in the spiritual life. One is towards individual development. So people practicing, developing themselves spiritually for their own benefit, but as a side product, it obviously will benefit others. But then there's this altruistic aspect of spiritual practice, and that's where the Bodhisattva ideal comes in. And the Bodhisattva ideal puts great stress on the altruistic dimension of spiritual practice. And they tend to categorize some practitioners who became enlightened to being a bit narrow. And they wanted to, first of all, expand the whole spectrum of Buddhist practice to a grand vision. There's of this incredibly, I guess, refined and very, I guess, transcendent qualities of enlightenment, that they felt, people getting too fixated on the individual, lose sight of. I mean, I personally can kind of relate to this distinction. You know, some people think it's false distinction, because if someone is very spiritually advanced and breaks through to enlightenment, they've transcended that small self. And yet, this Bodhisattva ideal has, I guess, evolved in very, very rich ways. So a Bodhisattva will, at the beginning of his path, make a vow to benefit all beings through their practice. And there's a very evolved tradition of perfections that the Bodhisattva will practice, such as supreme generosity, patient forbearance of a really high quality, ethics, energy. So there's a whole inspiration around energy, meditation, and wisdom. So, and there are many, as we talked about last time, there is a type of hierarchy or lineage of, I guess, inspiration, reverence, and respect of these figures. And there's also, I suppose, we could say in some ways, we could see Buddhism as a path. You know, we have the Buddha as enlightenment, and then we have a lot of teachings in different contexts of how to evolve and arrive at what the Buddha had taught, or arrive at insight or enlightenment. And there's a huge tradition around the different stages a bodhisattva will go through. And this is just a little introduction, so I won't be going into that. But there are different, I'll just suffice it for tonight's purposes to talk about a few different types of bodhisattva. So there's what's known as a novice bodhisattva, and I suppose any Buddhist practicing seriously could consider themselves a novice who starts practicing meditation, starts practicing ethics, and starts studying the wisdom teachings, and bears in mind that the more we progress, the more it will benefit other beings. And in some traditions, that's brought in a very practical way. You know, like you have something, somebody gives you something, or you have some good fortune, you imagine just offering it to all beings. Or if you're suffering in some way, you bring to mind other beings suffering in that way. So that's kind of on a mundane, more of a mundane level. But then, and so there have been figures all through Buddhist history that are deemed as bodhisattvas. And last time I talked about our teacher Sangha and his teachers, the lineage of inspiration of teachers, which in our tradition comes through our teacher Sangha, who was a monk in India for about 15 years and was initiated in different schools of Buddhism. And he just happened to be in northern India in the 1950s when many, many great Tibetan teachers fled from Tibet. And he received initiations and teachings from many of them. But one of them who's quite significant in our community, his name was Dharma Rinpoche, and he died in the 1990s. But, and he was what's known as a tulku in the Tibetan tradition, in that he was, around age 5, was deemed to be the incarnation of a great Lama. And from that time onwards, was educated by monks and educated to a very, very high degree. There's very, very rigorous in that tradition. And being told from a very young age that he had great compassion. And regardless of whether we believe in rebirth or not, there was something about his education and conditioning in the conditions he lived in that just brought out a lot of great qualities of compassion and wisdom. And he was, these tulkus are often, well, in Tibet, in the tradition, they would sit on thrones and have great ceremonial robes and be treated with great respect. But he was incredibly adaptable, as many of them were, in being in very changed circumstances and having to start all over, having fled Tibet. And what he did was, I guess, embody what a bodhisattva quality of compassion is, which is to see what is needed, see what is practically needed. So not get very weighed down emotionally by someone's suffering. The bodhisattva sees suffering and then sees what's needed. And he responded in a very practical way to all the orphans, children that were made orphans from Tibet. And he founded a school for these Tibetan orphans, and also a school to preserve Tibetan culture. And many of the order members in Triratna went to visit him over the years. He sent Sangha here to start a Buddhist movement. He really encouraged him to. And there's so many accounts of his great qualities of radiating love and his incredible down-to-earth generosity and amazing descriptions of all the practices he would do. So even when he was brushing his teeth, it would take him 45 minutes because he was visualizing or chanting, and he might maybe sleep for 4 hours because so much of his day was split between these deep spiritual practices and then the practicalities of helping these children. So I just think he's a wonderful example of what many considered was like a human bodhisattva who inspired so many. The people sometimes would burst into tears when they would meet up with him. But then there's another type of bodhisattva, and I'm going to talk to my friend Jill about that in a few minutes, and that's the symbolic or archetypal bodhisattva, who I guess embodies this ideal of the bodhisattva that rather than entering this fully enlightened state, they hold back entering nirvana to stay helping beings in the world who are suffering, and to practice and embody something in the world that we can access. And there's a whole tradition of very, very rich figures, thousands of them in the Indo-Tibetan tradition mainly, of beautiful figures that often visualized in a blue sky, and who exemplify some these beautiful qualities, so that can inspire us. And one of them, I think, that embodies this, I guess, this tension between stepping out into the world and helping people, but also needing to practice deep wisdom and I guess a withdrawal from worldly things, is a figure known as Green Tara. So she's a bodhisattva of compassion, and she's very beautiful. And these beings, their bodily posture will exemplify these qualities. So she'll have one foot stepping out into the world onto a lotus, but another one seated in meditation posture. And there are many versions of Green Tara, different colors. And I have one very beautiful version of White Tara, another bodhisattva, who is often associated with moonlight, the qualities of the moon and how the moon reflects in different ways the water. And she's a very still, poised figure. There's something very balanced about her. And what's extraordinary about her is she has 7 eyes. So eyes in the soles of her feet, her hands, and her forehead. And often she can be meditated upon, and people will find great qualities of stillness and poise in their practice. So this is just a little taster of these beautiful figures. We'll talk a bit more about it. But I'll just say a last word or two about, we will, as the weeks go by, also talk about other dimensions of Sangha. And while these figures can be deeply inspiring, I find them so, they can also be quite daunting in terms of the level of attainment they're at. And we could feel like we can't, sometimes the gap feels too far. And this is where there's also a great tradition of having people around us who are just a bit more experienced or committed. And we can also get a lot of inspiration and help in our spiritual practice for that. So that's another dimension of Sangha. And I have, tonight in this room with me are a few of friends who we've been practicing together for a long time. So that's another dimension to juxtapose with these very, very exalted end of what Sangha means. And we'll be exploring that in the next few weeks. So now I'm turning to my good friend Jill. Jill, are there any symbolic or living beings that have inspired you in that way, as a bodhisattva?
Well, I think Avalokiteshvara, the 1,000-armed bodhisattva, has kind of always appealed to me.
Yeah.
So I was on retreat, and the first night we were given a talk about Avalokiteshvara, and I think there was just something about the idea. So he was a bodhisattva. He's sort of a mythical figure, really.
Yes.
And he sort of vowed to dedicate himself to saving mankind, and did lots of good work to try and save mankind. And he said, if I ever sort of fail in my endeavours, then I'll split into 10, I think. And then he meditated for a very long time to try to save the world, and then he looked around him and realised that there was still so much suffering. Yeah. And he sort of lost faith briefly, and he split into 10. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, thousands of pieces, actually.
Thousands of pieces, and then apparently Amitabha came and sort of put him back together with 1,000 arms and 10 heads.
Yeah, yeah.
So that he'd have these 1,000 arms to save the world with.
Yes, yes.
And in the talk they were talking about our sort of Sangha, the Triratna Buddhist movement, and how we could all be one of those arms. And yes. I just thought that was really inspiring.
Yes,
so it's that thing that we don't have to do it all ourselves.
Yep.
That we can sort of, we can work together.
Yeah.
And of course, you can do a lot more with other people than just on your own.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think that was what really sowed that seed of appreciation.
Yeah, so, I'm wondering did you resonate with Avalokiteshvara's frustration that he couldn't help all beings? Or,
definitely.
Yeah, because I always see you as a pretty generous being who responds to people, likes to respond, has responded quite generously to people who are suffering.
I think it was definitely, it's been a thing for me that I wanted to do something that I felt was useful.
Yes, yeah.
And of course we all have our limitations.
That's right, yes.
We do what we do.
Yes, yeah.
We do the best we can, but of course it's always limited.
Yes.
And I think it's quite easy to look at what we do and it's never enough.
Yeah.
It's never going to be enough. So
yeah.
Yes, that definitely resonated with me.
Yeah, yeah. I love that myth too, because I just think, as you said, he came through up against this tension of his deep heart wish and aspiration, and he made it was a vow too. So vows are very important for bodhisattvas, and it was, he's probably the most loved and significant figure in Tibet. The Om Mani Padme Hum. I think a lot of Westerners know that mantra. That's his mantra. And after trying so hard, he saw he could only help a few people in Tibet. So it wasn't, it wasn't even close to getting to saving one kingdom even, and and then something shattered, like he shattered, so that, which can sometimes be seen as maybe a breakthrough too. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think there's something also about the ego gets a bit bound up in, I will try and do all these things.
That's right, yeah.
And it's sort of all about me, being
not really.
a good person out in the world.
Yes.
I think pure altruism is a fine thing.
That's
but
right.
I think it's probably quite rare.
Yeah.
So yes, that whole thing about actually, use a common phrase, getting over yourself, really.
Yeah.
And then to share things. So it's not about me saving the world or me doing all this stuff. It's about us doing it between us. So I think that's a much more beautiful ideal, actually.
Yeah, and then he admits defeat. Sometimes he reminds me of Humpty Dumpty sitting on the wall, and then he had this great fall. He has this great fall. And then Amitabha is like another symbolic emanation of a Buddha, of a quality of the Buddha. He's the head of a symbolic family, of which Avalokiteshvara became a member. So there's all sorts of families with these bodhisattvas. It's got very elaborate, but Avalokiteshvara calls out in agony, and Amitabha puts him back. In a way, did he put him back to where he was before? No.
So, I mean, he gives them these 1,000 arms.
Yeah.
And then apparently he's on the top of one of the heads.
One of his 10 heads that look in these different directions. Yeah.
They're sort of shining the light in a way.
Yeah. And do you think that's better than what he was?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's very rich, isn't it? I mean, the symbolism is very rich, and there's all this stuff about him holding the sort of Chintamani jewel, the wish-fulfilling jewel.
Yes, which is like the will of, which symbolizes bodhicitta, which is very significant for bodhisattvas.
So it's kind of the will to enlightenment.
The will to enlightenment, so wanting to gain enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Which is quite a high thing.
It's
because
quite a big deal.
Because I must say, when I first started practicing, it was more like I just wanted to be happier in myself. I didn't have those, but then with time, it's seen as being very significant when it's like something happens in the universe, when you really get all your energies behind wanting to gain enlightenment for the sake of all beings. You kind of got over yourself, as you say, and it's more, that you can see you can help others, and that's the motivation. So it's quite a tipping point.
And I think you talked about energy earlier, and about, I think there is that thing when you become more concentrated and you're not so scattered in your energies. That's right. That you actually do have more energy.
That's right.
To do what you need to do. Really.
Yeah. And 1,000 arms and 10 heads is a lot of energy, actually.
Quite helpful.
And each hand has an eye in it, a bit like, eyes are really symbolic of wisdom, and each hand has a different, as you say, a different tool. So it has been adopted as a symbol of the order for Triratna. That we share this vision of practicing for the benefit of the world, and that we each have something to contribute. So it is very wonderful.
So I also like that. So I think that's also, we're not all the same. We all have different gifts.
That's right.
We all have different things that we can offer.
That's right.
And actually appreciating that. So I think that's also really quite significant too.
Yeah, it is. And the heads looking in different directions. It's really weird, isn't it? It's like a weird and wonderful figure. Like he couldn't be mended back to where he was, but he became something so much, so transcendent in a certain way.
Beyond that,
yeah, beyond the human, beyond that human limitation. And Avalokiteshvara has a significant meaning, the name. I don't know, which means, well, Avalo means Lord, or
Lord of looking down.
Looking down, yeah. So he sort of looks down with his heads, I guess, with compassion.
And round.
Compassion, yeah. And he has many different forms in different countries. And I think you mentioned to me there's another famous form of Avalokiteshvara.
Oh, so there's Kuan Yin.
Kuan Yin, who's a female.
More Chinese.
Yeah, she's
sort of.
She's very revered in China.
Yeah.
And she's seen as the female Avalokiteshvara, and she kind of rises out of the sea, and is associated with many things, but most significantly, her name means kind of a corollary to Avalokiteshvara. So he looks down. Her name means the one who listens to the cries of the world. So, which I find very beautiful. Yeah.
Because there's also something about him meditating on the sounds of the world, Avalokiteshvara.
Could be, yeah. Well, there's mantra. So each figure has a mantra. So there's which is a sound symbol. So they have the hand symbols, the whole body, and what they're wearing. Because this figure, White Tara, also wears Amitabha, the red Buddha, in her head. So she's part of the family too. And and Avalokiteshvara is such a loved figure in Indo-Tibetan tradition. There are hundreds of forms. So there are 4-arm Avalokiteshvaras, there are blue ones, all so it's it kind of denotes the richness of, I think they've come out of people's meditations over thousands of years, and it in people something very transformative. And I think I've found in just sitting with those qualities. I don't know if you've visualized any of them.
Yeah, there was a really nice meditation I found online actually. There was this kind of visualization of being with Avalokiteshvara, and it was just really rich, and it was just kind of very warming and comforting actually. So I know you were saying about it's a very high ideal, and of course it is, but there's also the feeling that you have these figures that are actually sort of there in the world.
That's
there
right.
There is this compassion in the world, and that we can sort of, it's something to aspire to. So yes.
They kind of can be seen as energies, symbolizing energies, that. And can be very accessible too, because enlightenment can be very abstract, something we're moving to, and something that they're kind of seen as gateways or intermediaries, and they're dedicated to us, to helping us. So thanks, Jill. Good talk.
Thank you.
Good talking about Avalokiteshvara with you.
Great, so I hope you enjoyed that Dharma Night talk. So if you did enjoy it, if you're enjoying our videos, I just want to ask you or encourage you to think about making a donation to the Brixton Buddhist community. We're a UK charity that relies completely on your donations to run everything here. And if this was a meditation class, there'd be a donation bowl that you could just put in £10 at the end of the night to help support the activities. But as you're watching this online, I just want to ask you to think about making an online donation. If you've watched 4 or 5 videos this month, maybe you might want to think about giving £10. So there's a link in the description below where you can go to our website and make a donation. And if you want to keep giving, you don't want to worry about making that donation every month, well, you could just set us up a standing order, a monthly standing order. That would be really, really helpful. I want to suggest something of the region of maybe £10 or £20 a month if you're able to do that, and that would be really, really helpful and help us keep producing videos like this one. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself.